The company is in good standing. My mission is to turn the female lead into a villain, so I deliberately approached Guningyan. I flirted with the sweet and obedient girl until her cheeks flushed, stirring up twisted desires. Then, at the moment she loved me the most, I faked my death and disappeared. Sure enough, Guningyan's villainy meter maxed out. But before I could celebrate the completion of my task, the system suddenly sounded an alarm. The villainy value of the female lead is too high. The world is on the verge of destruction. The host must find a way to lower the villainy meter. Damn it! Upon re-entering the world, I was imprisoned on a bed shrouded in eternal darkness by Guningyan. She gently stroked my neck, her smile as soft as water. Brother, you once said you liked seeing me go crazy. Am I crazy enough now? Brother, why did you come back so late? Just as I got home, I was suddenly embraced from behind. Guningyan softly kissed my back. Her delicate scent wrapped around me ambiguously. It was as if she was marking her prey. A warm, soft touch came from behind, making me shiver involuntarily. Worked overtime today. Couldn't help it. Her voice carried a trace of grievance. Then don't go to work anymore, brother. I'll take care of you. I couldn't help but chuckle. After 5 years together, I know Guningyan too well. Having grown up in a repressive, dark environment, it made her possessiveness over me extremely strong. She always tries in every possible way to keep me by her side for 24 hours a day. Coming home late today probably made her feel insecure again. I habitually patted Guningyan's head, planning to give her a kiss to comfort her. But as I lowered my head, just as I was about to kiss her, warning, there is only 1 day left until the mission of turning the female lead into a villain is completed. Host, please speed up the progress. Otherwise, the host will be obliterated. I abruptly stopped my actions. Almost forgot. My mission is to turn Guningyan into a villain. I'm destined to push Guningyan into the abyss sooner or later. If I kiss her now, I'm afraid that when she looks back in the future, she find me even more fake and disgusting. Guningyan is the female lead in a Yander novel. She grew up with a dark childhood, which gradually twisted her mind and led her to villainy. After meeting the sunshine-like male lead, out of possessiveness and insecurity, she imprisoned him by her side. But after spending a long time together, Guningyan was slowly healed by the male lead. Eventually, they fell in love with each other and became a couple in the end. This was supposed to be Guningyan's ending, but reality always diverges from the script. In one of the world lines, Guningyan's nature was gentle and kind. So through endless torment and humiliation, not only did she not turn evil, she became even stronger. This made it impossible for the plot to progress. Thus, the system urgently dispatched me to this world. The mission is to turn the female lead into a villain, then deliver her to the original male lead for redemption. I agreed. Then after entering this world, I started being sincerely kind to Guningyan. When she was lonely and helpless, I took her in. I gave her a home. When she was bullied by some thugs, I risked myself to stand up for her and bandaged her wounds. When she had nightmares and was paralyzed by fear, I held her tightly, whispering gently over and over, "Don't be afraid. I will always be by your side." And so, 5 years passed. Guningyan's villainy value didn't increase even a bit, but her affection for me maxed out completely. The system was confused. Host, what are you doing? Your mission is to twist her into a villain, not to win her heart. Aren't you supposed to be tormenting her? I smiled slightly. Guningyan is very strong. Tormenting her would only make her more unyielding. I need her to fall in love with me, and then die tragically before her eyes, so she can watch as the one she loves is swallowed by darkness, helpless to stop it. I concluded. That way, Guningyan will seek revenge for me, turning to violence for violence, and will willingly become a villain. The system shuddered. You truly are a seasoned story traveler. This plan is terrifyingly flawless. However, despite these words, my plan had a flaw over the long 5 years. Not for any other reason, but simply because Guningyin was just a good. I truly fell in love with her. Guningyin loved clinging to me, calling me brother. She loved giving me everything beautiful. Her gaze toward me always gentle and filled with deep affection. Even when I gave her just a bit of sweetness, she would immediately offer her whole heart to me, holding it in her hands like a precious gift, sincere and passionate. Even though I had completed countless missions before, I couldn't avoid being drawn to such a girl. So selfishly, I wanted to spend more time with her, and kept delaying the mission until today. But today is the last day of the mission deadline. I can no longer delay it. I must leave Guningyin. I have to personally push this girl, who is filled with love for me, into the endless darkness. I looked around, noticing the room was filled with flowers and candles, elegant and luxurious. I couldn't help but ask out of curiosity, is today some important occasion? Guningyin's lips curled into a gentle smile. Yes, very important. Take a guess, brother. These days, I had been preoccupied with thoughts of leaving, physically and mentally exhausted, and I hadn't paid any attention to what day it was. So I made a wild guess. With such grand decorations, is it to celebrate your birthday? Guningyin shook her head. No! Today is the day you took me in. Our 5-year anniversary. I was stunned. The day I took Guningyin in. How long ago was that? I didn't even remember which day it was anymore. Yet Guningyin had silently remembered it for 5 years. Seeing my shocked expression, Guningyin lowered her eyes and softly said, before I met you, everyone treated me like a jinx. They all avoided me, hoping I would go mad and fall into despair. But only you were genuinely kind to me. My life only gained meaning after you appeared, brother. Guningyin's clear eyes gazed at me, filled with fervent love. Today is the most important day for me. Much more important than my birthday. A wave of bitterness surged in my heart. I looked at the girl before me. My vision blurred slightly. In truth, I wasn't genuinely kind to her. I was just like those who bullied her, hoping she'd go mad and turn evil. But Guningyin didn't notice my reddening eyes. She continued to smile and act playfully. So now that brother knows what day it is, do you have a gift for me? I slowly opened my mouth. But before I could answer, a series of frantic knocks echoed from the door. My heart stopped abruptly. They've come! As Guningyin stood up to open the door, I quickly stepped in front of her, then yanked the door open. In the next moment, a sharp knife pierced through my body. Blood gushed out, splattering everywhere. One droplet landed at the corner of Guningyin's eye, turning her gaze crimson. Guningyin hadn't yet processed what was happening. She stood there, staring blankly at me as I collapsed, muttering in disbelief. Brother? Unfortunately, I couldn't hear her. In my rapidly fading senses, I could only see a group of thugs storming in, stepping over me, laughing arrogantly. Hey, when you sent us to the police because of this woman, Guningyin, weren't you pretty tough? Yeah, exactly. Why aren't you standing up to say a few more words now? We told you before, brother. Don't mess with us. We've got people backing us. You pissed us off. Today, even if you die, no one will avenge you. Insane insults and mocking laughter echoed. The once warm and cozy house instantly felt like it had plunged into hell. In my final moments, I glanced at Guningyin one last time. She was kneeling in front of my body, desperately trying to stop the bleeding from my wound. Her eyes were filled with crimson, her expression one of despair and pain. It seemed like she was still calling my name. But I was dying. I couldn't hear it. A tear slipped from the corner of my eye, silently merging with the blood on the floor. And so, the female lead who had always lived in darkness finally received her first gift in 20 years. My corpse. Congratulations, host! Character Guningyan's villainy value is now 100%. Congratulations, host! Character Guningyan has unlocked the plotline, Vengeful Massacre of the Thugs. The original plot deviation is being corrected. Congratulations, host! Your rewards have been issued. Amidst all the congratulatory messages, I couldn't feel any joy. Even though I wasn't dead, I had merely exited the world within the book. But the last sight of Guningyan's bloodstained, desperate, and crazed face was burned deeply into my memory, and I couldn't escape it. I returned to the original world. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. I had already resumed my work, but I still haven't fully adjusted to living alone again. Without that gentle and thoughtful girl by my side, everything feels out of place, but life always has to move forward. No matter how much I miss her, I can't see her anymore. I leaned against the balcony railing, letting the evening breeze blow over me with a sense of melancholy. Host, suddenly, the long-forgotten mechanical voice of the system burst out. My thoughts were abruptly interrupted, startling me. What is it? The system gave a nervous, awkward laugh. Something, and it's good news too. I paused. The system continued. Host, due to your excessive longing for the female lead, Guningyan, our system was so moved that we've decided to send you back to her. I froze. I immediately jumped up from the railing, grabbing hold of the system. Stop making these unfunny jokes. What's really going on? I've been a story traveler for many years, and I've never heard of anyone being sent back into a book because of longing. That lie is way too weak. Sure enough, after being called out, the system immediately switched to a mournful tone. It sobbed. Host, something has gone terribly wrong. According to the original plot, after Guningyan's turn to villainy, she was supposed to meet the male lead who would save her, and the two would fall in love at first sight. But now, Guningyan has gone too far in her villainy. Her mind is completely consumed by thoughts of your death. She won't even look at the original male lead. The plot is stuck. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. Is that really worth mentioning? Just have the male lead be patient and slowly win her over. That should work, right? They are destined as the male and female leads. Given enough time, they will inevitably fall in love. The system began crying even louder. But the problem is, the male lead couldn't keep his cool. When he saw that Guningyan's mind was filled only with you, his pride was hurt. In a fit of anger, he blurted out that you're a story traveler and that your mission was to turn her into a villain. What? My heart sank sharply. Guningyan was stunned on the spot. I don't even dare to recall the look in her eyes. It was truly terrifying. The system shuddered all over. In short, the current situation is, Guningyan has fully embraced villainy. Not only did she kill the thugs, she's planning to kill the male lead, and even wants to destroy the entire world inside the book. We might have to go back and lower her villainy value again. The system's voice grew smaller and smaller with guilt. My vision went dark, and I took several deep breaths to accept the news. But I still couldn't hold back my frustration as I cursed the system. So why did you say earlier that there was good news? What's so good about this? The system timidly tried to explain. Because, host, don't you miss the female lead too? I thought you'd be happy to see her again. I sighed deeply. Is it possible that I'm missing the innocent girl from before? Not the one who now knows I'm a fraud and has turned into a completely unhinged villain? But complaining wouldn't change anything. With the system's pleading, I ended up returning to the world of the book once more. Then I found myself reincarnated as an anonymous bystander. Wait, I remember last time I came here, I at least had some status as a supporting character, right? The system spoke softly. Well, host, that body is already dead. Right. It finally hit me. The previous body was brutally killed right in front of Gu Ningyan. At the time, out of sentiment, she probably would have given me a grand funeral. But now, she knows I'm just a liar. From start to finish, a manipulative fraud trying to drive her insane. Would Gu Ningyan, in her rage, dig me up and desecrate my corpse? As my thoughts spiraled, a droplet of water suddenly hit my face. It started raining. I looked around and realized I was at a funeral. Everyone was dressed in black. It was hard to tell who was who in the misty rain. I couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "System, what part of the plot is this? Whose funeral is it?" The system explained, "This is Gu Ningyan's father's funeral. After his death, Gu Ningyan, the lost heiress, was brought back to inherit the estate." The system's voice suddenly turned serious. "But host, be cautious. Gu Ningyan is now in the late stages of her villainy. She's extremely dangerous. Even her father's death ... well, actually ... Gu Ningyan." A male voice suddenly interrupted. A young man dressed in a black uniform, his handsome face shadowed with sorrow, spoke from beside me. "Don't be sad. Even though your father has passed away, I'm still here with you." I froze. I knew this young man. We'd crossed paths during one of my missions before. He's the original male lead of the story. When if the male lead is here, then the Gu Ningyan he just mentioned could only be... Suddenly, a lazy chuckle interrupted, catching me off guard. A woman appeared next to me, though I hadn't noticed her arrival. Her lips parted slightly, her voice sultry and melodious. "Thank you for your company. I'm no longer sad, Mr. Wen." With just these few words, I was completely rooted to the spot, my heartbeat suddenly accelerating. Even after 5 years, I could never mistake her. This was Gu Ningyan, and not just any version of her, but the original novels. Manic, extreme, and ruthlessly vicious Gu Ningyan, now wielding boundless wealth and power. I couldn't help but sneak a glance to the side, and sure enough, standing next to Wen Yuan was a woman in a flowing, elegant gown, her figure delicate and alluring. Though the rain obscured her face, I could see her arm linked intimately with his. Her movements were as close as they had once been with me. I felt a flood of complicated emotions, a little bit of bitterness, but mostly a cold and growing fear. Yes, fear. The system had warned me. Gu Ningyan's heart had already become twisted. She was plotting to kill the male lead and destroy the world. But her current behavior, she seemed every bit the noble and graceful lady, chatting happily with her lover. Her demeanor was flawless, too perfect to find any fault with. As expected from the original novel's female lead, a master of disguise with deeply calculated schemes, my scalp tingled with unease. Though I had come back with the mission to win over Gu Ningyan, everything was happening too suddenly. I wasn't ready to face her yet. I had no idea how to handle this version of her so different from before. Better to avoid her for now. With that thought, I turned quickly to leave. But having just crossed back into this world, I hadn't fully adapted to this new body yet. Add to that the slippery rain-soaked ground, and sure enough, I slipped and fell. Completely unprepared, I hit the ground hard. Just as I was scrambling to get back up, a pair of delicate, snowy hands suddenly reached out to me. Those hands gently grasped mine, helping me to stand up. I brushed at the edge of my clothes, about to lift my head in gratitude. Thanks, but before I could finish, a familiar, faint fragrance drifted over. It was Gu Ningyan. A cold shiver shot through me, and instinctively I shielded my face and took several steps back, frantically trying to distance myself from her. But the hand holding mine didn't loosen its grip. Suddenly, she yanked my hand away from my face, leaving me no chance to avoid her gaze. Those eyes were unmistakable. Gu Ningyan's gaze was cold and deep, fixated straight on me, as if she could peer directly into my soul. Yet when she spoke, Her tone was soft and tender, like a lover whispering sweetly, "Brother." Every muscle in my body froze. Guningyin, she recognized me, but that's impossible. I clearly have a different body now. My appearance should be completely different from before. As I racked my brain trying to understand, the system suddenly whispered, "Host, since you came back this time to win over Guningyin, and considering her 100% affection for your former self, the body you're inhabiting now actually resembles your old appearance by about 80%. It makes it easier for Guningyin to recognize you and rekindle her feelings for you. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Did you have to wait until I was caught by Guningyin while looking like this to mention it? And by the way, rekindle feelings?" I glanced nervously at Guningyin's inscrutable gaze, my scalp tingling even more. Why did it feel like she was more inclined to kill me than rekindle anything? Just then, when Yuan suddenly approached curiously from the side, "Guningyin, what are you doing?" His gaze landed on my face. The next second, his expression shifted from shock to confusion, and finally to a barely concealed disgust. "Why is it that face again? What the hell? Wait, am I just some generic-looking guy?" When Yuan wrinkled his nose in disdain, "You guys all trying to leech off women. Can you at least do your homework first?" Ningyu was never Guningyin's ideal lover. He was nothing but a lying scumbag. You all imitating his looks to get close to her will only make her feel disgusted. Ningyu, that was my name. I froze, and suddenly, a vague realization started to dawn on me. So, after I died for Guningyin, it seems a lot of people thought I had become her true love. So they all started altering themselves to look like me, trying to get close to her. But they walked right into a landmine. After all, I might have once been Guningyin's moonlight. But after the truth came out, I could only be the most despised liar in her eyes. Naturally, those who had altered themselves to resemble me were also hated by association. But there's a silver lining to this, which is Guningyin probably hasn't truly recognized me. She must just be lumping me in with those who altered themselves to be her stand-in admirers. Since that's the case, why not play along? I hesitated for less than a second. Then I turned and boldly embraced Guningyin. Her eyes flickered slightly, and I steeled myself, forcing my eyes to redden, feigning a heartbroken expression. "I'm sorry, Miss Gu. I didn't mean to alter myself to look like Ningyu. I've actually admired you for a long time. I just wanted you to notice me. In a moment of foolishness, I made a mistake. Please don't hate me. All right?" Years of experience traveling through stories had honed my acting skills to perfection. Clinging to Guningyin, refusing to let go. I must have looked exactly like one of those shameless, pathetic side characters in novels, throwing themselves at the protagonist. Beside me, when Yuan was so furious that veins bulged on his forehead. "Get lost, you cheap imitation. Don't touch my Guningyin," he yelled as he stepped forward. He shoved me aside, then grabbed hold of Guningyin's sleeve. "Guningyin, let's go quickly. The host is calling you over. Just throw this lunatic out already. Hurry up and kick me out. Guningyin, forgive me, I'm not ready to face you yet. I should wait until I've come up with a thorough plan to win you over." With that thought, I looked at Guningyin with a hint of expectation, but instead of following Wen Yuan, she smiled, her crimson lips curling up. She ignored Wen Yuan, and instead reached out her jade-like arm, gently wrapping it around my neck. Then she leaned in on tiptoe, whispering softly in my ear, her breath warm. "Don't be sad. I don't dislike you. If that's the case, why don't you come with me?" Instinctively, I tried to step back, but her body was pressed against mine, leaving me unable to move. With a smile, Guningyin tilted her head. "What's wrong? Didn't you say you've admired me for a long time? Not happy?" I was stunned. "Happy, of course." Guningyin nodded. "That's good. Let's go then." With that, she really did take my hand, and we walked side by side. The warmth from her hand spread through mine, while cold sweat broke out in my palms from the tension. For the first time, I felt like I was stuck in a situation I couldn't escape from. How is this going so differently from what I expected? Why is Guningian being so gentle with me? And what exactly does she plan to do with me next? Amidst this cloud of confusion, I realized Guningian had truly changed from the person she was 5 years ago. Now, every one of her actions catches me off guard, making it impossible to guess what she's thinking. Just like the description in the original novel, she has a deep mind and is unpredictable in her moods. Since that's the case, I can only go along with her for now. I followed her cautiously, thinking it's rare to be my own stand-in. Beside us, Wen Yuan's fists were clenched tight. He glared at me with hatred, as if ready to beat me up at any moment. But with Guningian present, he was forced to follow us in silence. Soon, we arrived at the center of the funeral. A pitch-black coffin lay quietly on the lawn, surrounded by countless rows of chairs. The air buzzed with the murmur of the crowd. After all, this was the funeral of the head of one of the top families in S City. Everywhere you looked, there were signs of extravagant wealth. All the city's elites and wealthy merchants had gathered here. I was stunned. Being rich sure has its perks. Even a funeral could be held like a top-tier banquet among high society. The host approached and spoke to Guningian softly. She smiled and nodded. Then she released my hand and whispered, "Wait for me." After that, she walked forward, following the procedure to offer prayers for her deceased father. The crowd fell silent instantly. I stood among them, watching as Guningian, in her elegant black gown, softly recited her prayers. The rain mist blurred her striking features and veiled the coldness in her eyes. She looked like a pure, holy angel, devoutly praying for the deceased. Just as I was lost in thought, the system's sharp alarm suddenly blared, its tone urgent as if it were on fire. "Host, something terrible is about to happen. You must stop Guningian immediately." I was stunned, glancing at Guningian, who was still praying. What's wrong? Is there something wrong with what she's saying? The system was on the verge of tears. Her words are fine, but what she's planning next is a huge problem. I just scanned Guningian's plan and discovered that she planted several specialized explosives during the funeral. She intends to blow the place up as soon as the prayers are finished. We need to stop her right away. I hadn't fully processed the information yet, instinctively asking, "Several explosives? How many exactly?" The system's tone grew unusually serious. "Enough to blow up half the world line and open a rift for Guningian to escape into the real world." My heart stopped. A rift to the real world? That can't happen. If someone as antisocial and dangerous as Guningian enters the real world, who knows what kind of destruction she could cause? I looked up at Guningian again, and a cold chill surged through me, though her face was still as exquisite and beautiful as ever. To me, she now appeared as a devil wrapped in angelic skin. The sister urged me anxiously, "Host, there's only 1 minute left until the prayer ends. You need to come up with something fast. What should I do? How can I stop her?" Cold sweat started to bead on my forehead. Should I try to snatch the detonator from her? But I don't know where it is, and I'm not confident I can take it from Guningian. If only there were a way to make her stop voluntarily. I was panicking, struggling for a solution, while Guningian continued softly reciting her lines. "May the gods bless the soul in this coffin, even if their words were full of lies. Let their falsehoods be transformed into truth." As soon as these words left her lips, a chorus of gasps erupted from the crowd. Did I hear that right? The person in the coffin was full of lies? Is that part of the prayer? Oh my god, is Miss Gu implying her father was a liar? Was there this much conflict within the Gu family? Hush, there are so many Gu family members here. How could you say something like that? Do you have a death wish? But before the crowd could fully digest this shocking statement, something even more surprising happened. A young man, his eyes red, suddenly rushed toward Gu Ningyan. Gu Ningyan, I have something to say to you. It was when Yuan. His outburst interrupted the prayer to hell. Gu Ningyan raised her head, looking at him coldly. My heart, which had been in my throat, finally relaxed. I let out a quiet sigh of relief. Seeing Wen Yuan's panicked expression, I realized he must have gotten the system's warning as well. He was going to stop Gu Ningyan. And now that he's rushing forward, he must have thought of a solution. Sure enough, under the eyes of the crowd, Wen Yuan, with reddened eyes, loudly declared, Gu Ningyan, please forgive my sudden rudeness, but I have something incredibly important that I must say to you right now. His voice trembled, sounding almost choked with emotion. I am not like Ningyu, that liar who betrayed you. You may not believe me, but I exist to love you, to save you. I've been by your side for 5 years. I know better than anyone how much pain you're in, and I'm the one who most wants to help end your suffering. The male led, a symbol of salvation, extended his hand to Gu Ningyan. If your life is always shrouded in darkness, could I be the one to light your way? Hearing these familiar words, I was stunned. Memories stirred within me. In the original story, it was these very words that made the villainous girl fall in love with the healing boy, thus beginning their deeply tragic love story. You could say this line was one of the iconic moments in the original plot. I finally exhaled a breath of relief with these words, and Wen Yuan's sincere expression just now, Gu Ningyan's descent into villainy should come to an end. But before I could fully relax, Gu Ningyan suddenly let out a soft laugh. Her gaze passed over the crowd and landed directly on me. Her beautiful eyes were filled with madness and obsession. No! If anyone is going to light my way, it will be him. The person who led me into the darkness wouldn't be happy about it. When Yuan froze, I was also stunned. This reaction was completely different from the original story. But before I had time to process it, the system urgently prompted me again. Host, hurry up. There are only 10 seconds left before the bomb detonates. 10 seconds? My heart leapt into my throat. There was no time to think of a new plan. I gritted my teeth. And in a desperate move, I pushed through the crowd and pulled Gu Ningyan into my arms. Before she could react, I wrapped my arm around her waist, lowered my head, and kissed her forcefully. The world seemed to fall into silence. Gu Ningyan's eyes widened slightly. Her lips were cut by the roughness of my kiss. A faint taste of blood spread between us. But she didn't seem to feel any pain. She didn't move at all, letting me kiss her without resistance. Congratulations, host! The female lead's dangerous actions have been halted. Alert cancelled! As soon as the system announced this, I released Gu Ningyan, gasping for air. I had just taken a wild gamble, and never expected that such a bold move would actually stop her. But before I could fully relax, I looked up and met Gu Ningyan's deep, haunting gaze. It seems Gu Ningyan's focus has shifted from the bomb to me. I laughed awkwardly, suddenly struck with inspiration. I remembered the devoted imposter persona I had been playing earlier. So thinking quickly, I blurted out, Gu Ningyan, you know how much I admire you. Why are you still entangled with other men in front of everyone? I won't allow any other man to confess to you. You belong to me and me alone. I'm jealous. As soon as the words left my mouth, the entire crowd was dumbfounded. I was even more mortified, my scalp tingling with embarrassment. Those words lacked any sense of boundaries. It was as if I had recklessly bold written all over my face. If someone else had said this to Gu Ningyan, I would have ridiculed them without hesitation, thinking, who do you think you are? But since it was me who said it, if Gu Ningyan really hated me, She should be utterly disgusted by now. But to my astonishment, she wasn't. In my bewildered gaze, Gu Ningyin stood on her tiptoes and kissed me back, as if we were truly a couple in love. My eyes shot open wide. I even forgot to breathe. Gu Ningyin's eyes shimmered faintly. In the heated, intimate moment, she softly whispered in my ear, "I don't entangle with others. I belong to you and you alone. Let's go home." As I sat in Gu Ningyin's car, my emotions were a chaotic mess. No matter how oblivious I tried to be, it was clear to me now, Gu Ningyin doesn't hate me. In fact, she seems to like me quite a bit, despite the fact that I'm now just a stand-in who resembles my former self by 80%. I couldn't quite figure out how I felt about it, but the fact that she still has feelings for me was undeniable. This would make it easier for me to complete my mission. With this new identity, I could stay by Gu Ningyin's side, gradually winning her over and lowering her villainy value. As I was mentally calculating my next steps, a soft voice suddenly broke through my thoughts. "Ningyu, brother." I'd heard this title for 5 years. It was so familiar. Without thinking, I responded instinctively. "What is it?" The car, which had been speeding along, came to an abrupt halt. Gu Ningyin's expression darkened. She turned her head and stared directly at me. "It's really you, isn't it, brother?" My heart began to race, and as realization hit, a chilling wave surged through me. I was done for. How could I have carelessly responded to that? Now my new identity, barely established, was exposed. I stiffened, locking eyes with Gu Ningyin in a heavy silence. I had imagined countless scenarios where Gu Ningyin would discover my true identity. Maybe she would show an expression of disgust and curse me as a deceitful liar. Maybe she would sneer, mocking me for trying to approach her again. Or perhaps she wouldn't want to see me at all and would throw me out immediately. But I had never expected that upon learning who I truly was, Gu Ningyin would sit there like this, silently confronting me in the car. The air around us felt like it had frozen. The dim light in the car cast deep shadows over her face, making her gaze seem even darker, an unreadable void in her eyes. I couldn't discern a single emotion. Finally, she was the one to break the silence. "If I hadn't exposed you, how long were you planning to deceive me this time with your new identity?" I clenched my fists. Feeling so guilty, I didn't dare take a deep breath. I awkwardly tried to steer the conversation away. "When did you realize I was deceiving you?" Gu Ningyin glanced at me indifferently. "I knew from the moment you entered this world. You've been gone for so long. Do you think I wouldn't grow at all? You really thought I'd fall for your lies a second time?" I was stunned. So that means, from the moment I stepped into this world, Gu Ningyin already knew I was the real Ningyu. But instead of confronting me directly, she watched me like a spectator, amused as I played the role of her supposed stand-in, flustered and nervous. Then, just when I thought my disguise had worked, she casually exposed me, leaving me utterly embarrassed. From beginning to end, she toyed with me, keeping me in the dark. This was the twisted amusement of the mad female lead from the original story, clear as day. However, I cautiously glanced at Gu Ningyin. Since I entered this world, her demeanor had been cold and calm. No madness, no rage, not even anger. It seemed like my deceit and return didn't bother her as much as I thought they would. Because of that, some of my tension began to ease. Carefully, I probed. "Gu Ningyin, about what I did to you before. Do you mind it?" Gu Ningyin's long lash lowered, concealing the emotions in her eyes. "There's nothing to mind. You went home to complete your mission and used me as a stepping stone. Isn't that normal?" Her eyes trembled slightly. "From the moment I was born, I've always been abandoned by people. I'm used to it." The scent of the perfume in the car hung in the air, lingering faintly between us. I wasn't sure if the fragrance was too strong, but it made me feel a bit dazed. looking at Guningyan's lowered head. For a brief moment, I felt as though this mad woman was truly sad. It reminded me of 5 years ago, when the pure and kind girl would seek comfort from me. And so, I couldn't help but soften, speaking softly, just as I had comforted her countless times before. What I did before was wrong, I'm sorry. Last time, yes, I came to turn you into a villain. But this time, it's different. As I spoke, my face began to heat up. This time, I'm here with the opposite intention. If you don't mind, I can stay by your side properly this time, to make up for what happened before. Guningyan froze for a moment. Then, she spoke softly. Is it true this time? Are you not lying to me? I nodded. I didn't know if this would make Guningyan feel a bit happier, but as I looked at her with hopeful eyes, her lips slowly curled upward, until finally, she smiled a dark, twisted smile. She said, "But I lied to you, brother." The strong fragrance in the car grew even more overpowering. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness hit my head. I sluggishly realized there was something wrong with this scent. I looked at Guningyan in disbelief. You actually drugged me through the perfume? Guningyan smiled. It's not a drug, just something to make you fall asleep early, brother. The next moment, she leaned closer to me, her warm, sultry breath brushing against my skin. Her body soft and snake-like pressed against mine, making it hard for me to breathe. Instinctively, I tried to push her away, but whatever she used on me had already taken effect. I was completely drained of strength, my limbs so weak I couldn't move. All I could do was watch as Guningyan lowered her head and bit down on my shoulder, leaving a deep mark. It was as if she was reclaiming her lost prey, marking it again. A tingling, numbing pain shot through me. Dizzy and disoriented, I cursed. Guningyan, you really are a lunatic. Before I completely lost consciousness, I saw the smile on Guningyan's face widen. She had finally shed her polite and gentle mask, revealing the madness that lay beneath. A madness that sent chills down my spine. I'm not crazy. Didn't you just say you wanted to make it up to me? You lied to me once, so I'm lying to you this time. That's fair compensation, isn't it, brother? When I opened my eyes again, I found myself lying on a bed, surrounded by luxurious furniture and decor. The room was opulent, but everything was draped in a dim, unsettling light. The atmosphere in the room was stifling and heavy, as if no light could ever reach this place. I frowned, instinctively wanting to leave. But as soon as I tried to move, a cold metallic sensation brushed against my skin. I looked down, only to realize my hands and feet had been bound by silver chains at some point. Now I was confined to the bed, unable to move. Awake! A familiar voice sounded. Guningyan's slender figure emerged from the shadows, her ever-present smile still on her face. Brother, you sure sleep a lot. You've been out for quite a while. She had the audacity to say that. Was I sleeping? I was clearly drugged unconscious. I took a few deep breaths, suppressing the fury and fear welling up inside me. I tried to remain calm as I rattled the chains on my wrists. What is this supposed to mean? Sorry, brother. It's my fault for being so presumptuous, but I'm really afraid you'll leave again. Just like you did 5 years ago. Guningyan absent-mindedly toyed with the chains. So if I can't keep you with emotions, I thought I'd try physical means instead. A chilling wave of fear surged through me. Though Guningyan spoke words of apology and claimed to be afraid, her actions said otherwise. She was always pretending to be gentle and harmless, innocent and pitiable. But once her prey was lured in and ensnared, she revealed her true ruthless nature, striking with precision and cruelty. One swift, fatal blow. She was exactly like the deceitful, manipulative female lead in the original story. There wasn't a trace left of the girl she once was. However, what Guningyan didn't know was that I am a story traveler with a system. and I can leave this world whenever I want. These silver chains couldn't possibly hold me. Thinking this, I gently knocked on the system. Are you there? No response. A sudden wave of unease surged through me. I knocked again, more urgently this time. But the usually chatty system remained completely silent. It was as if it had vanished into thin air. Why isn't it answering? Brother. Guningyan's lazy smile lingered on her face. Let me guess. Are you looking for your system right now? My scalp prickled with shock. I stared at her warily. How do you know about that? Guningyan chuckled softly. Brother, did you really think that after you left, I spent all my time crying and turning into a villain? Her tone became laced with pity. Of course not. Quite the opposite, in fact. To make sure you couldn't use the system to deceive me again, I studied it thoroughly. For example, she walked closer to me, an overwhelming sense of pressure radiating from her. Each step seemed to crush my chest. I invented a bomb capable of blowing up this world line. I originally planned to destroy it and enter your world. I figured out how to hear the system's voice. So this time, when you entered my world, I was the first to receive the notification. And for example, I even found materials that can block the system. At least in this special room, you won't be able to reach your system, brother. Cold sweat slowly trickled down my forehead. The original story did mention that Guningyan was a genius in scientific research, but in the novel, she specialized in electronics and technology. She was supposed to use her research to build her own business empire. So why had she turned to studying the system now? Everything was spiraling out of control. Before I could fully process it, Guningyan had already straddled me. Her movements were forceful, but her voice was soft and sweet, so gentle it sent shivers down my spine. Since you can't escape, why don't you just stay by my side, brother? Wouldn't that be nice? A chill ran through me. What are you trying to do? I hadn't even finished speaking before her lips descended upon mine. Cutting off my words, she kissed me from my forehead to the tip of my nose, then to my lips, and continued downward, as if confirming my very existence. The heat of her touch enveloped me, sending tingling sensations through my body. My face burned, and it felt like my blood was boiling. It wasn't until her hands reached a certain place that I snapped back to reality. I instinctively bit down on her shoulder, breathing heavily as I yelled, Guningyan, what's gotten into you? I hadn't controlled my strength, and the taste of blood filled my mouth. But Guningyan acted as if she felt no pain. She didn't let go of me. Her eyes were filled with a twisted emotion. She let out a self-deprecating laugh. I'm going crazy, but brother, isn't that exactly what you wanted? You wanted to see me lose my mind. She moved closer to my face, her red eyes locking onto mine. 5 years ago to make me go mad. You lied to me for 5 years. You died in the cruelest way possible. Pushed me toward when you went, without a care for my feelings. Look at me now. Am I crazy enough yet? So why don't you like me? This was the first time Guningyan had lost control of her emotions. Her hands tightened around my neck, completely losing her sanity, as if she was about to do something even more dangerous to me. A sense of unprecedented danger engulfed me. Every part of my body screamed that I needed to stop her now. In a panic, I trembled as I lied. It's because I hate you. Whether you're crazy or sane, I hate you. 5 years ago, I only said I liked you because of the mission. It was a lie. Don't you understand yet? The room fell deathly silent. Only the sound of the silver chains clinking echoed. But my words had the desired effect. Guningyan's face turned pale in an instant. Her body wavered for a moment. Then she slowly stood up and walked out of the room, leaving behind a barely audible whisper. You've lied to me again. My heart felt like it had been pierced. 5 years of living together with Gu Ningyan had bound us deeply. This was the first time I had been so harsh with her. Even though I had wanted to push Gu Ningyan away, seeing her walk away like that made my heart ache a little. Was what I said too cruel? Should I have found a gentler way to distance myself from her? But I quickly realized my worrying was unnecessary. When I saw Gu Ningyan again, she had already tucked away all of her chaotic emotions, putting back on her smiling mask. She sat beside the bed, holding a tray of food, feeding me bite by bite. As if our earlier confrontation had never happened. Her gentleness and patience were unnerving. Brother, I made these dishes just like how you liked them before. Do they taste the same? If not, I'll change them. By now, I had calmed down and realized something important. Since my mission this time is to lower Gu Ningyan's villainy, I need to slowly change her, not fight with her. With that in mind, I casually nodded. The taste is fine, and so life carried on in this strange, uneasy peace. The chains binding me had been removed. Although I still couldn't leave the room, I was free to walk around inside. As I wandered, I suddenly made a new discovery. This place, shrouded in darkness, where the furniture had always appeared as vague shapes, looked different when I got closer. I realized they all seemed strangely familiar. They were exactly like the furniture from 5 years ago. The arrangement of everything in this room was identical to the apartment where Gu Ningyan and I used to live. And it wasn't just the furniture. Everything around me, even Gu Ningyan herself, began to resemble how things were 5 years ago. Gu Ningyan visited every day. Sometimes she would catch me off guard with a kiss. Other times, she would patiently dry my hair, or sit with me to watch movies and share dinner. At night, she loved to snuggle into my arms, holding me close as we slept. During those moments, the cold paleness of her face would regain a touch of warmth, and she no longer seemed so inhumanly distant. At first, I resisted her sudden closeness, but it didn't take long for me to grow accustomed to it. After all, the careful attention, the warmth and lively atmosphere, and the tenderness of this girl, they weren't unfamiliar to me. On the contrary, it felt exactly like the life I had 5 years ago. On occasion, under the glow of candlelight, Gu Ningyan's deep, beautiful eyes would take on a soft warmth, making her seem gentler. Looking at her like that, I would often feel a bit dazed, as if time had truly rewound itself, as if the sincere, passionate girl from the past was in front of me once again. My heartbeat would start to race. Before I knew it, it seemed I had truly become a prisoner of Gu Ningyan. My body was confined to this room, and my soul was trapped in a dream carefully recreated by Gu Ningyan herself. It was a dazzling dream from 5 years ago, but all dreams must eventually end. Tonight, a small slip of paper was tucked into the dinner tray. On it, there was a line of unfamiliar handwriting, each word radiating a cold, unsettling aura. Ningyu, Gu Ningyan's villainy is still at its maximum. I am the only one designated to reduce it. If you don't want to fail your mission and be erased, bring the system and come meet me. Below was an address. I immediately snapped back to reality, as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over me. I knew! The person who wrote this note was Wen Yuan. After all, in the original setting, the only one who could reduce Gu Ningyan's villainy was the fated male lead. I also knew Wen Yuan had never been friendly towards me. His sudden offer to help me complete the mission was undoubtedly filled with ulterior motives. But none of that mattered to me. What mattered was this: Gu Ningyan's villainy was still at its peak. I had originally thought that by staying in this cage, slowly mending the regrets from 5 years ago with her, I could heal her heart. I believed that one day, her villainy value would decrease. But now, thinking carefully, it seemed that the entire time Gu Ningyan had been with me, she had been wearing a mask. She was pretending to be the girl from 5 years ago, wearing the same mask from her youth, living with me as if nothing had changed, to the point where even I almost fell for it. But what about Guningyin? Was she really unaffected by everything I had done when she was with me? Did she truly feel nothing beneath the surface? Was she genuinely treating me sincerely? Or was she simply watching me like a fool, thinking I was gullible and easy to deceive? I had no idea. I couldn't see through Guningyin's mask to uncover her true thoughts. I was completely ignorant of her schemes, her emotions, her plans, and even her current villainy level. I knew nothing at all. I had even willingly trapped myself in this cage, not wanting to leave. Realizing this, a chill crept down my spine. How could I have been so careless? The female lead in the original story was a master at disguising her true intentions, deceiving and manipulating hearts. I glanced at the tightly closed door of the room, my fists gradually clenching. Tonight, it seemed I needed to step outside. That night, as soon as Guningyin stepped into the room, I instinctively wrapped my arms around her slender waist, my face still holding a gentle smile. Guningyin, do you remember what today is? Guningyin looked a little surprised, but still obediently wrapped her arms around my neck, answering sweetly, "Of course I remember. Today is the 10-year anniversary of when you took me in, brother." Even though I had already known she would say that, hearing her answer still made my heart skip a beat. To others, it was a trivial memory, but Guningyin had actually remembered it for 5 years and then 5 more. In the next moment, her warm breath brushed against my ear, soft and teasingly intimate. "Brother, you're being so forward tonight. Did you prepare a special gift for me?" I steadied myself. Then I leaned in and kissed her willingly. "Yes, I love you." Guningyin's eyes widened in disbelief. Her body stiffened where she stood, completely unprepared for my kiss. As our heated breaths intertwined, I struggled to keep myself focused and quickly passed the drug I had hidden under my tongue to her. I wasn't sure if it was just my imagination, but the brightness in Guningyin's eyes suddenly dimmed. She collapsed to the ground shortly after, losing consciousness. Her final words echoed softly, "Brother, you're such a liar." I stood up, staring at the unconscious Guningyin, still in disbelief. Was it really that easy? Had I really managed to knock her out so simply? But I didn't have time to question it further. I had to seize this rare opportunity to escape from the cage. As I stepped out of the room, I glanced back one last time. Guningyin lay quietly with her eyes closed, her pale skin appearing even more fragile under the dim light. She looked broken. I couldn't bear to look any longer. Clenching my teeth, I finally turned and left. Yes, I truly am a heartless liar. Twice now on our anniversary, I had used Guningyin's feelings against her, and then walked away. The address on the note led me to an abandoned factory. As soon as I stepped through the gate, a group of men dressed like bodyguards rushed toward me, quickly tying me up. You really are too easy to fool." I stared expressionlessly as when Yuan emerged from the shadows. His lips curled into a mocking smile. His tone dripped with sarcasm. "So foolish. I really can't understand what Guningyin sees in you." I kept my gaze on him, not letting his words get under my skin, but feeling a subtle sense of unease. The last time I saw Wen Yuan, he still had the confidence and energy of a young man. But in just a few days, he looked like he had aged significantly, with dark circles under his eyes showing clear exhaustion. His mental state seemed in shambles. What had happened to him? When Yuan noticed my silence and stopped mocking me, he quietly studied me for a moment. "So Guningyin likes your face, huh? I guess I can't turn into someone she finds appealing. No matter how many times I look at that face of yours, it just makes me sick." I frowned slightly. "You called me here. What exactly do you want?" When Yuan let out a low chuckle. I just don't get it. I'm supposed to be the fated male lead. So why does Guningyan like you? I even told her the truth. That you're nothing but a liar, and your mission is to destroy her. His voice suddenly rose. Why does she still obsess over you? Why? To be honest, I didn't know either. But after spending so much time with Guningyan, I could feel it. Guningyan wasn't just a character in a story anymore. She had her own emotions, flesh and soul. She was a living, breathing person. So she wasn't bound by the plot to love someone who doesn't love her in return. When Yuan gritted his teeth, pacing back and forth in front of me, for you, Guningyan was willing to destroy this entire world. She even killed her own father. Hearing this, I froze. What do you mean, killed her own father? When Yuan let out a cold snort, you didn't know? A few days ago, Guningyan was planning to blow up this world line at the funeral. But since she took you away, the plan was halted. After she left, I secretly sent people to search that area to find and dispose of any remaining explosives and eliminate the threat. But do you know what we found? His body trembled, as if recalling something deeply disturbing. In a dark, filthy drainage ditch, I found Guningyan's father, the once powerful ruler of the largest family in S City. His body had been carelessly buried in a foul ditch. I was shocked. Her father in a drainage ditch? Then who was in the coffin at the funeral? You really have the nerve to ask. When Yuan glared at me with disgust, I used the system to scan the coffin. And guess what I saw? Your face. It was your body in that coffin. The system later confirmed it. After you faked your death 5 years ago, Guningyan somehow preserved your corpse. She spent those 5 years with your dead body, only burying it when you returned in person. What? I could hardly believe what I was hearing. My heart pounded violently. I had always assumed that Guningyan hated me for deceiving her and would have treated my corpse with disdain. But I never imagined that for 5 years she had been clinging to a lifeless body just to get by. The shell I had so callously shed in my fake death, she had cherished it for 5 whole years. When Yuan stepped forward, his eyes red with anger as he grabbed my collar. All of this chaos is because of you. You've ruined everything, twisted our plot into a mess. And now look, the female lead has become a real lunatic, and the male lead can't even complete his mission. I'm about to be erased. So why did you come back? Why didn't you just die? My body was tied up, unable to move. But my gaze grew colder. For the first time, I retaliated against Wen Yuan's taunts. Why did I come back? If I remember correctly, you entered this world before me, didn't you? You were supposed to be the savior, the male lead. So why didn't you save Guningyan sooner? When Yuan's loud accusations abruptly stopped. In those early years when Guningyan had no power, I was the one who stayed by her side, enduring the hardest times together. We were penniless, bullied by thugs. We shared one bowl of noodles, huddled together for warmth, bandaged each other's wounds. But where were you? I locked my gaze on him, pushing him further. You were the eldest son of the Wen family, comfortably living in your mansion, dreaming of rich and beautiful women throwing themselves at you in the future. I don't blame you for being afraid of hardship. That's only human. But the fact that you did nothing for Guningyan, and now, after she's risen to power, you come crying, claiming to be her savior. Don't you think that's ridiculous? My tone dropped to an icy chill. If your idea of salvation is only being there for the good times and not the bad, then your salvation is worthless. Wen Yuan's face turned pale in an instant. He took a step back, muttering to himself, trying to comfort his crumbling pride. No, that's not true. It wasn't like that. In the original story, I didn't help Guningyan, but she still fell in love with me. It's all because of you. Everything changed when you showed up. If you disappeared, the plot would go back to normal. His expression twisted, becoming more deranged. Suddenly, he pulled out a knife and lunged at me with it. I didn't move. The next moment, the knife was deflected away, bouncing off as if it had hit an invisible barrier. When you unfroze in shock for a second, then quickly realized what had happened. I can't believe I forgot about this. That's right, I hadn't come to this meeting unprepared. As soon as I stepped out of the signal-blocking prison, I reconnected with the system. And to ensure the host's safety, every system comes with built-in protection mechanisms. Unless I voluntarily choose to die, like I did 5 years ago. With the thugs, no weapon can harm me. But when you reacted quickly, letting out a cold laugh. So I can't use tools to kill you, but I can't even hit you to vent my frustration? As he spoke, he immediately raised his arm high, ready to slap me hard across the face. This turn of events caught me off guard. Instinctively, I closed my eyes. But the pain I expected never came. I didn't think Wen Yuan would suddenly stop out of the goodness of his heart. So I opened my eyes, confused. To my surprise, Wen Yuan's arm was being held by a slender, pale hand. His face turned bright red, and he stared in shock at something behind me. His voice became stammered. Ji Gu Ningyin? My entire body froze. Even after being kidnapped and nearly stabbed, my heart had never pounded as fast as it did now. The woman who should have been unconscious in the cage was now standing behind me. The familiar, cold scent of hers surrounded me, enveloping me completely. Just to see him? Gu Ningyin's voice whispered near my ear, hot and burning. Yet her tone was icy cold. I turned around with difficulty. How are you here? Weren't you unconscious? Gu Ningyin gently stroked my neck with her fingers, her touch soft as water. Brother, did you forget? Today isn't just the 10th anniversary of when you took me in. It's also the 5-year anniversary of your escape. A day worth remembering for a lifetime. How could I not be prepared? A chill ran down my spine. I knew it. Gu Ningyin wasn't as easy to fool as I had hoped, but Wen Yuan, standing beside me, was clearly more panicked than I was. He forced a fake smile. Gu Ningyin, I was only about to hit Ningyu, because he provoked me with his words first. I just lost my temper. Gu Ningyin cast him a cold glance. There's no need to lie in front of me. Out of all the systems, yours is the one I'm most familiar with. I know your mission ends today, which is why you were so eager to trick Ningyu into coming here to vent your anger. When you unfroze, the color drained completely from his face. How do you know that? Gu Ningyin gave a malicious smile. Do you know why I allowed you to stay close to me all these years? It's because, aside from my brother, you were the only one around me who had a system. If I wanted to study the system, of course I had to start with you. When you unstumbled back a step, his eyes turning red, looking like a man who had been betrayed. So you never liked me? It was all because of my system? Gu Ningyin bent down, slowly untying the ropes binding me. Her tone I scolded. I told you, there's no need to pretend in front of me. There's no need to act like you're deeply in love and innocent. You know full well what terrible things you've done to my brother, and now you even tried to hurt him again. Her voice grew sharper, filled with murderous intent. Wen Yuan, the only reason I haven't killed you yet is dot. You should be grateful that your system still has some value to me. Why are you crying? Wen Yuan's face turned even paler than before. He took a step back, shocked. You knew all of that? But Gu Ningyin, before he could process his disbelief, Wen Yuan immediately grabbed the hem of Gu Ningyin's dress, choking out his explanation through sobs. 5 years ago, I only had those thugs corner Ningyu because I knew you were the female lead. I figured you'd protect him. So I thought it would be harmless to bully him a little. I suddenly froze. Thugs? My thoughts raced back to 5 years ago. Back then in a secluded alleyway. A group of thugs had suddenly cornered me for no apparent reason. They stole the money I had saved up for Guningyan's tuition, beat me mercilessly, and laughed as they recorded the whole thing. Their leader had sneered. "Why so angry? Don't you know? You've crossed the wrong people? Come on, smile for the camera. It'll look better in the video." What? Thinking about revenge? Here's some advice, pal. We've got people backing us. Try getting revenge, and you'll end up dead. That turned out to be prophetic. Later, Guningyan had arrived and called the police, getting the thugs arrested. And then 5 years ago, those same thugs had broken into our home to exact revenge, and I was stabbed in the heart, dying a gruesome death. So they were right. I hadn't died a good death, but getting stabbed, that was all part of my plan. I had deliberately leaked the address to those thugs, inviting them to come for revenge. I had then naturally used them as stepping stones on Guningyan's path to darkness. But the robbery and humiliation in that alley, that was something I had no clue about. For countless nights, I had wondered, while staying by Guningyan's side, just what kind of person I had offended. Now, I finally knew. It had been Wenyuan all along. I clenched my fists tightly, anger finally burning in my gaze as I looked at Wenyuan. But Wenyuan wasn't looking at me. He was still desperately clutching Guningyan's dress, like a drowning man grasping at straws. "Guningyan, I'm really sorry about that. But nothing truly bad happened to Ningyu in the end, right? I knew you were strong enough to protect him." Guningyan coldly shook off his hand, her voice icy as she looked down on him. "And so, I'm protecting him now." When Yuan collapsed to his knees in defeat, the old, broken clock nearby ticked away, echoing through the silence. I glanced up, noticing that only half an hour remained until the new day, when Yuan was about to be erased. But just then, something no one could have anticipated happened. When Yuan suddenly grabbed the knife from the ground and lunged at me with it. A desperate scream tore from his throat. "Ningyu, don't get too cocky. Even if I die, I'll drag you down with me." An automatic barrier instantly activated around me. I frowned. "I've already told you, you can't hurt me." But before I could finish, there was a sudden sound of breaking. A cracking sound rang out. The protective barrier suddenly developed a fracture. In the next moment, it shattered completely into pieces. When Yuan laughed maniacally, I exchanged my last half hour of life to strengthen my attack. "Your shield won't hold. Say goodbye and die peacefully." The gleaming tip of the knife rushed towards me. But before I could react, a figure moved faster than the knife, positioning itself between me and the blade. In the next instant, blood splattered everywhere. A warm drop of blood landed on the corner of my eye. I stared blankly upward, seeing Guningyan, her chest pierced through by the knife. When Yuan, still clutching the knife, was kicked to the ground. He lay there, disheveled, looking at Guningyan in disbelief. His voice shook uncontrollably, stammering in defense. "No, Guningyan, no! I wasn't trying to kill you. I was aiming for Ningyu. How did you get hurt?" But before he could finish his sentence, a cold, mechanical warning echoed. "Transmigrator 038. Your mission to conquer the female lead has expired. Failure to complete the task. You will now face immediate eradication." In the next instant, when Yuan's body began to disintegrate like dissolving code, breaking apart into scattered data, there was no time for him to say anything else. Only a piercing scream remained, and then he vanished from existence. But I couldn't pay attention to any of that. Instinctively, I caught Guningyan as she fell. My mind went completely blank. Blood was pouring from her wound, flowing endlessly. Everywhere I looked was drenched in red. I still couldn't believe it. Guningyan had taken the knife from me. The cunning, calculating female lead from the original story had nearly died. For a mere supporting male character, a fraud like me, I murmured. Why? Gu Ningyin's face was deathly pale, her breathing weak, as if she would slip away at any moment. But despite that, she still forced a smile, because I didn't want to see you die in front of me again. That's much scarier than me dying myself. In that instant, it felt as if the knife had pierced my own heart. My whole body throbbed in unbearable pain. Tears spilled from my eyes uncontrollably. Gu Ningyin weakly reached up to wipe away my tears. Her voice was soft. Brother, when you tried to escape tonight, didn't you say you loved me? My heart skipped a beat. It was true. When I was trying to escape earlier tonight, to distract her, I had casually said, I love you. Gu Ningyin's gaze, no longer dark and complex, was filled with pure and sincere affection, just like the look in her eyes 5 years ago when she was still a girl. Even though I know you were lying, hearing such a beautiful lie before I die, it still makes me happy. Actually, I love you too. When Yuan was erased, and Gu Ningyin was rushed to the hospital, the knife had missed her vital organs by a few inches. But she was still in the ICU, fighting for her life. She hadn't been out of danger yet. So for the past few days, I've been overwhelmed, barely catching my breath, paying Gu Ningyin's hospital bills, waiting outside the operating room, and visiting every temple to pray for safety charms. After just a few days, dark circles had formed under my eyes. Even the doctor couldn't take it anymore, forcing me to sit down on the couch and insisting that I sleep for a while. But I couldn't sleep. The moment I closed my eyes, the image of Gu Ningyin, covered in blood, whispering that she loved me, would flash before me, vivid as ever. Sometimes, I couldn't help but wonder if Gu Ningyin was getting back at me. 5 years ago, I had orchestrated my own stabbing, leaving this world behind. And now, 5 years later, Gu Ningyin had taken a knife for me and remained unconscious, as if she wanted me to experience the pain of losing a loved one. A deep sense of bitterness welled up inside me, and the redness in my eyes was soon accompanied by a slight dampness. Stop, stop, stop. Host, don't cry. The system's anxious voice suddenly rang out, startling me as usual. It tried to comfort me. Host, don't be so sad. How about I tell you something else? To lift your spirits a little, okay? Listlessly, I asked, what do you want to tell me? The system immediately perked up. Host, remember when Yuan said that Gu Ningyin spent those 5 years hugging your corpse? I found that so twisted but thrilling. So I went ahead and dug up some evidence on it a few days ago. Judging from the system's unreliable tone, did it really find any credible evidence? But the system's voice became more serious. Host, listen, do you know why Gu Ningyin was always bullied as a child, and why she had such a miserable life? I shook my head in confusion. I had always assumed she was just unlucky, that she got the tragic, strong, but tormented lead role in her story. But was there more to it than that? It turned out, Gu Ningyin was the eldest daughter of the most powerful family in S City. Her status was noble, but the Gu family adhered to a harsh method of education. They believed in tempering their children by throwing them into slums and deliberately subjecting them to hardship. They thought that only this could forge a sharp, unyielding blade without any weakness. So, all the suffering Gu Ningyin endured in her early years was orchestrated by the Gu family, and my appearance disrupted their plans. Once I took Gu Ningyin home, her life began to brighten. Not only was she no longer in pain, but because of my companionship, she experienced rare moments of happiness. This was the opposite of what the Gu family had intended. So, the Gu family set their sights on me early on. They started sabotaging me behind the scenes and were planning to get rid of me altogether. So 5 years ago, even if the thugs hadn't killed me, I would have eventually died at the hands of the Gu family. Later on, When Guningyin returned to the Gu family after her descent into darkness, she discovered evidence that her father had been behind the attempts to harm me. So quietly and without a trace, she killed him and even dumped his body into the sewer and placed my body in the coffin, giving me the grandest funeral imaginable. The system, at this point, couldn't help but shake its head. The female lead's darkness really broke the charts. She never even did this much for the male lead in the original story. I bet the Gu family didn't expect that after tormenting Guningyin for so many years, she wouldn't break. But the moment you died, she completely shattered. Turns out, love can be even more twisted than hate. If it had been the old me hearing this, I probably would have echoed those sentiments, saying something like, "That's insane." But now, I couldn't say anything at all, because I didn't think Guningyin was crazy. In all the places I couldn't see, she had silently done so much for me. All I had ever seen was her unwavering, stubborn, a love that would run into a wall without ever turning back. With this thought, I suddenly spoke softly. "System, how is my mission progressing this time?" The system was silent for a moment. "Host, I have good news and bad news. Which would you like to hear first?" The bad news is, after everything that's happened, Guningyin's blackening value is still maxed out. My hand trembled slightly. The system continued in a softer voice. Guningyin has truly become deranged. She stopped at nothing to achieve her goals, and her blackening value will never decrease again. This, I knew, was a bitter fruit of my own making. I took a deep breath, and the good news is Guningyin's affection for you has been at maximum since 5 years ago, and it has never changed. I froze, listening to the system's words, my heart suddenly racing. All of her emotions, all of her desires, everything she aims for originates from you. Guningyin will listen to you, host, as long as you're by her side. She willingly be bound by you, and she won't do anything wrong again, because she loves you more than anyone else in this world. 5 days later, I sat beside the hospital bed, watching Guningyin's peaceful sleeping face. She was no longer in danger, but it was unclear when she would wake up. The system had disappeared. Before leaving, it told me it was heading to the next world to continue its missions, even though the system had been unreliable most of the time. After spending so much time together, I still felt a bit reluctant to let it go. The system had laughed and said, "Actually, when I first chose you as the mission taker, it was because I saw how lonely you were in the real world, with no family or friends. Now, seeing that someone loves you this much, I'm really happy for you." A lump of emotion rose in my throat. The system still said its goodbyes. "Don't miss me. Someone even better will come along and love you more than I ever could." I had a feeling that Guningyin would wake up soon. With that thought, my gaze rested once again on Guningyin's face. I gently stroked her cheek. "Don't make me worrying anymore. Wake up soon, okay?" But I waited and waited until the night fell. But that stubborn girl still didn't wake up. I lay my head down beside her bed, and without realizing it, I fell asleep. In my dream, I went back 10 years, to when I first brought Guningyin home. Back then, Guningyin was still very young. Her body was covered in wounds, and she often woke up at night trapped in nightmares. So I brought some ointment and carefully applied it to her injuries. Little by little, she didn't cry or make a fuss. Her bright eyes, like stars, were filled with anticipation. "Brother, you're so kind. Will you really always stay by my side?" I gently patted her head and comforted her softly. "I will." As time went on, Guningyin gradually emerged from her nightmares, and she finally began to sleep peacefully. The dream ended there, and in a half-awake state, I suddenly felt a soft touch on my face, as if someone was gently caressing my cheek. I quickly opened my eyes, and there, under the moonlight, was the familiar woman reaching out to soothe me. her movement mirroring exactly what I had done for her 10 years ago. Gu Ningyan's smile was filled with deep love. We meet again, brother. This time, it was Gu Ningyan's turn to pull me out of my nightmare. Gu Ningyan's perspective. When Ningyu died, Gu Ningyan felt like she had already lost her mind. She killed the gang of thugs, avenged Ningyu's death. But after that, her life plunged into a deep abyss of despair. In the field of research, Gu Ningyan was an exceptionally talented young woman. She began researching how to preserve Ningyu's body. Countless nights, she held that cold corpse in her arms, murmuring to herself, "Brother, you liar! Didn't you promise to stay with me forever?" Just when she could no longer bear it and was ready to end her own life, a strange young man appeared. The young man urgently stopped her actions. He said his name was Wen Yuan, and that he was a mission taker sent to save her. He also said that Ningyu was, in fact, also a mission taker, but a despicable one. A liar sent to deceive her. Ningyu's mission was to make Gu Ningyan fall into darkness. So, his protection, his salvation, and even his death were all part of an elaborate deception from beginning to end. After hearing these words, Gu Ningyan didn't remember how she felt. All she recalled was numbly returning to her room, staring at Ningyu's still lifelike corpse, and sitting awake through the night. That one night, she finally came to terms with her true feelings. It didn't matter that Ningyu had lied to her. She wasn't afraid of betrayal. She wasn't afraid of darkness. She didn't even care if others saw her as insane. The only thing she feared was Ningyu abandoning her completely and never returning. So, from that day forward, Gu Ningyan began immersing herself in system research. She believed that if the system could bring Ningyu to her once, then it could bring him to her a second time. She would make Ningyu return to her once again for her sometime later. The research finally made a breakthrough. Gu Ningyan realized that Ningyu had come to ensure the smooth progression of the original plot. So, as long as Gu Ningyan continued to descend into darkness, breaking the so-called original storyline, then Ningyu would have to return to fix the plot. He would surely come back again. So Gu Ningyan thought. The next step was simple. All she had to do was let her darkness value skyrocket. But this wasn't easy. No matter how much madness she unleashed, her darkness value would cap at 100, never breaking through. And with a darkness value of 100, she was still within the bounds of the original plot. It wasn't enough to bring Ningyu back. As Gu Ningyan became more and more anxious, the Gu family came looking for her. They were quite pleased with Gu Ningyan's current madness and decided to take her back to recognize her as part of the family. Gu Ningyan kept a polite smile on her face, but deep down, she had a gut feeling that something was off with them. Sure enough, after digging deeper, she discovered that most of the pain and bullying she and Ningyu had endured over the years had been orchestrated by them. Her father had even planned to kill Ningyu. So, one night, Gu Ningyan stormed into her father's sick room. As her father's terrified eyes widened, she spoke slowly. "Father, you went through so much trouble setting up this grand scheme to mold me into the perfect person you imagined. But you don't know, do you? Even after all you've done, I still love Ningyu. I've become this crazy because of him." Gu Ningyan leaned closer to her father and whispered, "How about this after you die? I'll give the entire Gu family as my dowry when I marry him. What do you think?" Her father's face bulged with veins, distorted with rage. But before he could spit out a few words of curse, he collapsed from the shock, suffering a fatal heart attack. In that moment, Gu Ningyan felt her blackening value finally break through the 100-point limit, completely losing control. It was then she knew Ningyu was bound to come back soon. Around that time, she merely disposed of her father's body into a filthy ditch and put Ningyu's corpse into the most luxurious coffin. She planned to give Ningyu the grandest funeral, forcing every member of the Gu family, the ones who had tormented them both, to mourn him. to cry for him, and after the prayers ended, she'd blow up the funeral, letting them continue to repent in hell. Finally, on that rainy day, Ningyu came back. He seemed awkward in his new body, slipping and falling right before Gu Ningyan. Gu Ningyan gently helped him up, though internally she was caught in a storm of emotions. Before then, she thought her feelings for Ningyu were tangled in love and hatred. She loved him for pulling her out of the swamp, but hated him for pushing her into the abyss. But when Ningyu truly returned, she realized that deep down, she had never hated him. It was only then she realized her feelings for him had always been singular. She just wanted to see him again, madly, obsessively craving another reunion. On the night of the 10-year anniversary, Ningyu drugged Gu Ningyan, then escaped the cage. But what he didn't know was, just after he left, Gu Ningyan stood up. She lowered her lashes, watching Ningyu's rapidly retreating figure. She had let him go on purpose. During the days Ningyu was imprisoned, Ningyan had suffered. This mad woman thought herself selfish. She thought, I'm the one trapped in the beautiful dream of 5 years ago. Why should I trap Ningyu in it too? He was always so vibrant and free. He shouldn't be locked in her cage. So Gu Ningyan stood up, gently touching the lip Ningyu had just bitten. Her red lips curled into a smile. The 10-year anniversary gift was yet another lie. But this time, the lie was sweet. Ningyu had said it. I love you. So she wasn't angry. Gu Ningyan packed her things and silently followed behind Ningyu. She had set him free, but she would always protect him from the shadows. Gu Ningyan had once told Ningyu, brother, did you really think I would just let you deceive me forever? But now she knew. She really was that naive and stupid enough to be mad about it. Perhaps she was just one of those women who were endlessly foolish and endlessly in love. Once she loved someone, even knowing that person was a vile liar, she would still willingly step into the lies they wove. A madwoman through and through. But Gu Ningyan didn't mind. Madness was madness. After all, liars and madwomen were naturally made for each other. Gu Ningyan was discharged from the hospital. We returned to the Gu family villa, where she began her slow recovery. I brought her a bowl of soup, feeding her one spoonful at a time. As Gu Ningyan drank, her eyes stayed glued to me, full of heat, as if I were her real nourishment. I tapped her on the head. What are you staring at? Focus on eating. Gu Ningyan smiled, as warm as spring. Of course, I'm looking at you, brother. You're so handsome. It's so wonderful to see you again. My face flushed from the compliment, and I couldn't help but tap her head again. It's been 5 years. And while you haven't learned anything useful, your smooth talking skills have definitely improved. The dignified, scheming young lady pouted, her voice suddenly tinged with rare vulnerability. But I'm being serious, brother. When I was unconscious, I was really afraid you'd run away again, that I'd be left alone. So when I woke up and saw you, I was truly relieved. This is the first time in my life that I've ever felt lucky. A wave of bittersweet emotion rose in my heart. The words of criticism I had prepared stuck in my throat, and I swallowed them back down. Looking at the fierce scar on Gu Ningyan's chest, I gently reached out to touch it. Does it still hurt? Gu Ningyan answered honestly. No, it doesn't hurt at all. In fact, it feels quite nice. The next moment, Gu Ningyan grabbed my hand, stopping me from touching her more. She wrapped her pale arms around my waist and kissed me passionately, the temperature in the room rising steadily, the atmosphere becoming charged with tension. I took a deep breath, placing a hand over her lips to stop her kiss. My voice was soft. You're still not fully recovered. The doctor said no intense activity. Gu Ningyan responded by kissing my hand, her warm breath sending shivers down my skin. Why don't you try and see for yourself if I've recovered? Her kiss was fervent, and though I knew better, I couldn't bring myself to push her away. I leaned down, allowing myself to be enveloped in her love. In the haze of our embrace, I found myself thinking, how could someone as warm and full of life as Guninyan ever be just a character from a book? My mind drifted back to 5 years ago, to that night on the 5th anniversary, the first time I left her. Back then, Guninyan had smiled and told me, "My life only began to have meaning after I met you, brother." At the time, I thought it was just a casual line, nothing more than a sweet phrase. But now, I realize it might have been the truth. The lonely girl had grown flesh and blood because of love, and gained a soul. And 5 years ago, she had stubbornly handed over her heart to me.